Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into How to Get Rich by the one and only Felix Dennis.
Oh, an interesting choice.
Right. If you're looking to kickstart your day with some positive energy, check out affirmifiedjourney.com.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Their personalized zodiac affirmations are a great way to do just that.
I can see the appeal.
But now back to Dennis. This guy, he was a multimillionaire, a magazine mogul, didn't sugarcoat the realities of wealth. He's brutally honest about the sacrifices involved.
Yeah, a lot of people skip over that part.
The toll it can take on your personal life.
It's not all sunshine and roses.
Even the potential to turn you into someone, well, you might not like.
That's a pretty profound thought. It's refreshing to see an author tackle these often ignored aspects of wealth. So many books focus on the glamour, the material rewards.
Right, the champagne and yachts.
But Dennis, he delves into the psychological and emotional complexities.
Exactly. He even admits that if he could go back, he'd aim for just enough to live comfortably, then cash out and focus on things like writing poetry, planting trees.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful statement coming from someone who built a magazine empire.
Yeah,
It suggests that even for those who achieve significant financial success,
the ones who seem to have it all.
there's often a yearning for something more, a deeper sense of purpose, beyond the accumulation of wealth.
Absolutely. But before we get into all that, let's start with how Dennis actually defines wealth. It's surprisingly vague,
Vague.
even for someone who clearly made it, you know? He estimates his net worth to be somewhere between $400 and $900 million,
That's a pretty wide range.
but admits he doesn't really know the exact figure.
Huh. It's interesting how he highlights this uncertainty even at such a high level of wealth.
You'd think he'd have a spreadsheet or something.
Right, but it speaks to the fluid nature of assets, I suppose.
And how net worth is often tied up in things that aren't easily quantifiable.
Like art or private businesses, I imagine.
He lists all the typical trappings of wealth. Multiple homes, fancy cars. He even rented private jets.
Sounds about right.
And then he throws in this gem. If it flies, floats, or fornicates, always rent it. It's cheaper in the long run.
Oh, classic Dennis. Always with the witty, unfiltered observations.
Right.
But beyond the humor, there's a practical lesson there about the hidden costs
That come with owning certain luxury items.
versus the flexibility, the potentially lower costs of renting.
Okay, let's move on to some of the common myths about getting rich. Dennis tackles these head on.
He doesn't hold back, does he?
He absolutely slams the idea of getting rich quick.
Yeah.
Says there are no get-rich-quick schemes. If you play the lottery, you are a moron.
Well, he certainly doesn't mince words. That's Dennis in a nutshell, though. No nonsense, straight to the point.
Absolutely.
He's not selling a fantasy.
Magic formula here.
He's laying down the truth as he sees it, and it's clear he sees those who chase shortcuts as, well, morons.
It's harsh, but there's a deeper point there. It's not just about the financial risk of those schemes.
Right, there's a mindset at play there.
It's about the mindset they represent.
That you can somehow bypass all the hard work.
This idea that you can bypass hard work and strategic thinking.
Who just get lucky.
That's what Dennis wants to shatter.
He wants people to understand that building real wealth takes time, effort, calculated risk, and a whole lot of resilience.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's not about finding a magic formula. It's about developing the right skills, the right mindset.
And the right habits. He also dismisses this idea that you need a great idea to get rich.
I was going to say, so many people get stuck on that.
He argues that execution is 1,000 times more important than the initial idea itself.
And he would know.
He says, even a mediocre idea, executed perfectly, can lead to success.
I think this is a crucial point, especially for aspiring entrepreneurs, the ones who get stuck in the ideation phase.
Waiting for that lightning bolt of inspiration.
Waiting for that perfect, groundbreaking concept. Dennis is saying, look, action trumps ideas every time.
Get out there and do it.
Exactly. It's about taking that idea, running with it.
Adapting as you go,
Yeah.
learning from your mistakes.
Constantly refining your approach. It reminds me of the lean startup methodology,
Oh yeah, that's a great comparison.
where you test your assumptions quickly.
Get that feedback.
Gather feedback, iterate based on real-world data. It's not about having all the answers up front.
Right.
It's about being agile, responsive, And he addresses this whole notion that it was easier to get rich in the past.
Oh, I've heard that one before.
He says, times change, but human nature, the lure of wealth, and the determination to acquire it remain a shining constant in the world of ambitious men and women.
So human nature stays the same, even if the circumstances change?
I think what he's getting at is that while the specific opportunities may shift,
But the internet wasn't around in the 1800s.
right, the underlying principles of success, they remain remarkably consistent. It's about recognizing the opportunities,
The ones that are relevant to your time.
then having the drive, the tenacity
Yeah.
to capitalize on them.
Speaking of opportunities, Dennis points out that even with the rise of emerging economies like China and India, the U.S. economy still holds a dominant position globally.
It's a reminder that while the landscape is shifting, the U.S. remains a powerhouse.
Absolutely.
And there's still immense potential for those willing to innovate,
To create.
create and build within that system.
So he lays out his definition of wealth,
Well, at least how he doesn't define it,
busts some common myths,
like get-rich-quick schemes.
and then he dives into some fascinating observations from his own journey.
This is where it gets really interesting.
One thing that really stood out to me was his focus on confidence.
Oh, that's a good one.
He sees it as a hallmark of wealth, something that's visible in how people carry themselves,
How they present themselves to the world.
how they make decisions.
It's an interesting point. He even talks about the confidence often observed in firstborn children
I'm a firstborn.
and suggests this might have played a role in his own success.
Makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Right? And this confidence, or lack thereof, ties into his discussion of fear,
The fear of failure.
what he calls the nightmare of failure.
Yeah, that can be paralyzing.
He actually encourages readers to tame that fear and use it as motivation.
That's an interesting approach. I think what's important here is that he's not advocating for ignoring fear.
No, he acknowledges it's there.
He's acknowledging it as a natural human emotion.
Right.
But he's suggesting we can choose to harness it
Use it as fuel.
rather than letting it paralyze us.
It's about reframing fear as a signal that you're on the right track, that you're pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, and that you're taking risks that could lead to significant rewards.
Exactly. And it ties into his overall message of being proactive, taking ownership, and not letting fear dictate your choices. For all his talk about being ruthless and confident, he's also surprisingly candid about the fact that his own career wasn't some meticulously planned ascent.
No silver spoon here.
He kind of stumbled into magazine publishing out of necessity, not because of some grand vision.
He was just trying to make ends meet.
It humanizes him, right? Even someone who achieved Dennis's level of success didn't necessarily start with a crystal clear roadmap.
It's encouraging for those of us who might not have it all figured out yet.
Exactly. He was just trying to make ends meet. And those early experiences, those moments of scrapping and hustling, well, they shaped his entrepreneurial journey. He even shares this great anecdote about trying to launch a U.S. version of a British pop music magazine.
Let me guess. Smash hits.
That's the one. He called it Star Hits, and he hired a young editor named Neil Tennant, who went on to become, wait for it, half of the Pet Shop Boys.
No way. That's amazing how Dennis's life intersects with these pop culture icons. But what's particularly interesting is that Star Hits, ultimately, it failed.
It did. And that failure highlights another crucial point he makes.
Which is?
You have to be willing to take risks, even if they don't always pay off.
Because you never know what might come out of it. Like meeting a future pop star.
Yeah. It's about having the courage to put yourself out there, knowing that you might stumble or even fall flat on your face.
But you get back up.
It's about reframing failure, not as a sign of defeat, but as a learning opportunity, a chance to refine your approach, gather valuable data, and come back stronger.
It's a mindset shift that's essential for any entrepreneur, especially in those early stages.
When you're likely to encounter more than a few setbacks, this leads us to one of my favorite parts of the book, his insights on specific business strategies. He has this knack for defying conventional wisdom.
And it often pays off.
For example, he talks about his idea for a poster magazine, essentially a magazine that was just a folded poster with articles on the back.
I never heard of that before.
It was a brilliant move, really.
Thank you.
He was able to charge the same cover price as traditional magazines, even though his production costs were significantly lower.
Smart.
He understood the market, saw an opportunity to disrupt the status quo, and created a product that resonated with readers while maximizing his profit margins.
How many copies did he sell?
He sold millions of copies worldwide.
Wow, that's impressive.
And then there's his decision to launch a bunch of magazines about personal computing back in the 1980s.
When home computers were just starting to become a thing.
Everyone told him it was a niche market, that no one would buy them.
But Dennis saw the potential.
But Dennis saw the potential of this burgeoning industry, and he was willing to bet on it even when others were skeptical.
He was ahead of the curve.
He understood that the early bird often catches the worm, and in this case, he caught a whole flock of them. Those magazines ended up making him a fortune.
So sometimes the best opportunities lie where others see only risk.
It's about having the foresight to identify emerging trends, the courage to go against the grain, and the tenacity to see your vision through, even when others doubt you.
Trust your instincts, challenge conventional wisdom, and then execute relentlessly.
That's the formula, isn't it? Vision, courage, and relentless execution.
I like it.
And Dennis provides some great examples of how he applied these principles throughout his career. He talks about the importance of saying no to opportunities that don't align with your goals.
Even if it means disappointing people.
Even if it means disappointing colleagues or missing out on seemingly lucrative deals.
You have to stay focused.
He really emphasizes the need to be strategic, focused, to avoid getting sidetracked by shiny objects that might distract you from your core mission.
It's about having the discipline to say no to the good, so you can say yes to the great.
Exactly. And he's also a big believer in identifying and capitalizing on emerging industries.
Those spaces where there's less competition.
Those spaces where there's less competition, more capital flowing. It's about getting in early.
Being the first one there.
Establishing yourself as a leader and riding the wave of growth as the industry matures. He even offers this great metaphor for different types of investors.
It's okay, I'm intrigued.
Fish, sharks, and dolphins.
Fish, sharks, and dolphins.
He says fish are those smaller, less demanding investors.
The guppies of the investment world.
Who might be ideal in the early stages of building a business. They're less likely to micromanage.
Or demand a huge chunk of equity.
Then there are the sharks.
Oh, I don't like the sound of those.
The big players who can bring significant capital.
But at what cost?
But might be more aggressive, more demanding.
So you have to choose your partners carefully.
And then there are the dolphins.
Okay, dolphins sound much friendlier.
Who represent a sort of middle ground. They're smart, strategic investors who can provide valuable guidance and support.
But without being overly controlling.
It's a great way to visualize the different types of investors you might encounter and to think strategically about who you want to partner with at each stage of your business growth.
He also talks about the importance of passion.
That's a common theme in a lot of these books.
But he adds a caveat.
Oh.
Don't get so fixated on your passion that you overlook potentially better opportunities.
I love that he adds that nuance.
Sometimes practicality wins out.
No! It's easy to get caught up in the romantic notion of pursuing your passion at all costs.
Follow your heart and the money will follow.
But Dennis reminds us that sometimes practicality and a willingness to adapt are more important for achieving financial success.
Which leads perfectly into his story about John Lennon, giving him a brutal reality check about his musical aspirations.
Oh, I remember this one. This is one of my favorite anecdotes in the book.
It's a good one.
Dennis was still harboring dreams of becoming a musician, and he played some of his songs for John Lennon.
Hoping for some encouragement, I imagine.
But Lennon, being the brutally honest guy he was, basically told Dennis he didn't have a unique voice. He said, people don't pay for imitations. You got to find your own voice or stick to editing your magazines.
Ouch.
It was a tough pill to swallow.
But sometimes the truth hurts.
But it was the truth. And sometimes we need that external perspective, even if it's delivered bluntly, to help us see our own limitations and redirect our energy toward areas where we're more likely to excel.
To his credit, Dennis took Lennon's feedback to heart.
He did.
He realized that his true talent lay in publishing, and he focused his energy on building his magazine empire.
It speaks to the importance of self-awareness.
Being honest with yourself.
Being honest with yourself about your strengths and your weaknesses.
And having the courage to adjust your course when necessary.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that our passions don't always align with our greatest talents. And sometimes the path to success involves letting go of those deeply held dreams and embracing the areas where we truly shine.
It's not about giving up. It's about being strategic. playing to your strength.
Exactly. Another example he uses is the story of Ray Kroc and McDonald's.
Ah, the fast food empire.
Dennis highlights how Kroc, he didn't invent the hamburger or even the fast food concept.
It's all about the execution.
He built his empire by focusing on execution and consistency, even in a seemingly mundane industry like fast food. He understood the power of systems, standardization, and delivering a predictable, efficient experience for customers.
And it clearly worked.
He had this almost obsessive focus on those fundamentals, and that, combined with his marketing savvy, well, it turned McDonald's into a global phenomenon.
I guess sometimes success is not about being flashy or innovative. It's often about doing the basics exceptionally well.
Consistently. And at scale.
And Dennis, he even encourages readers to study their competitors.
To learn from their successes.
Be willing to adapt and adopt strategies that are clearly working.
Even if it means setting aside pride.
And admitting that someone else might have a better approach.
There's a humility in that.
A willingness to learn from anyone.
Regardless of their position or status.
It's about recognizing that no one has all the answers.
And that there's always room for improvement.
Even if it means borrowing ideas from your rivals.
It's a growth mindset, isn't it? It's about being open to new ideas, constantly seeking ways to refine your approach, and recognizing that success is an ongoing journey of learning and evolution.
He then shares this cautionary tale about his own experience trying to launch a CD-ROM magazine.
Oh, yes, Blender.
Called Blender. He was convinced it was the future of media.
But it was a bit ahead of its time, perhaps.
It ended up being a massive flop. He poured millions of dollars into it, believing he was on the cutting edge.
The market just wasn't there. And this is where his point about reinforcing failure comes in.
You mean throwing good money after bad?
He admits that he stuck with Blender for far too long, even when it was clear it was a losing venture.
So how do you avoid that trap?
He got caught up in his own vision, in his belief that he could make it work.
It's understandable, though.
And he ended up throwing good money after bad. It's a trap that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into. They become emotionally invested in their ideas.
And it's hard to let go.
And they're reluctant to admit defeat, even when the evidence is staring them in the face.
It's that sunk cost fallacy, right?
Yeah.
You've already invested so much time, money, and energy that you feel compelled to keep going.
Even when it's no longer rational.
And Dennis's story is a reminder that sometimes knowing when to cut your losses is just as important as persistence.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing when a particular path is no longer viable and having the courage to pivot or move on to something else.
Detach from the project.
It's about detaching your ego from your ventures, being objective in your assessments, and making decisions based on data and market realities, rather than emotional attachment.
It's a tough lesson, but a valuable one. And it leads us to another important theme Dennis explores: the balance between acting small and thinking big.
How do you reconcile those two?
He stresses the importance of staying humble and connected to the details, even when you're experiencing success.
Even when you're at the top of your game.
He talks about walking to work, checking staff expenses, being meticulous about saving energy. These seemingly minor details, he argues, they reflect a mindset of frugality, of efficiency, and a deep understanding of how the business operates at every level.
It's about not losing sight of the fundamentals.
He even argues that this acting small mentality sets a good example for your employees, demonstrating a commitment to the company's values and a willingness to lead by example.
It's about not getting swept up in the trappings of success.
Staying grounded.
Remaining grounded and staying connected to the core principles that drive your business.
And this ties into his emphasis on attracting and retaining talent.
Absolutely. Dennis is adamant that talent is the lifeblood of any successful business.
You need good people to make it work.
He talks about offering opportunities for growth, being flexible with employees' needs, promoting from within.
Create a positive work environment.
It's about creating a culture where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to contribute their best work.
He even shares a story about how he convinced a key employee to stay with his company by offering him the opportunity to relocate to the U.S.
Wow, he was willing to go the extra mile.
He recognized this employee's value, and he was willing to go the extra mile to keep him on board.
It's about understanding that your people are your most valuable asset.
Your biggest investment.
And that investing in their growth and well-being is just as important as investing in any other aspect of your business.
And he also provides a compelling example of the power of partnership with his story about co-founding Micro Warehouse, a billion-dollar tech company.
Oh, that's a great story. This venture really highlights the advantages of having strong partners who share the workload, bring diverse skill sets to the table,
Two heads are better than one.
and provide support during those inevitable challenging times.
It's a reminder that even the most successful entrepreneurs don't always go it alone.
They recognize the value of collaboration, leveraging the strengths of others to achieve shared goals.
But even within partnerships, Dennis emphasizes the importance of maintaining control. He recounts a story about firing employees who demanded ownership in his company.
Oh, that's a tough situation.
This demonstrates his unwavering belief in staying true to his vision
And not relinquishing control.
of something he'd poured his heart and soul into building.
It's a reminder that while collaboration is essential, it's equally important to set clear boundaries
Define roles and responsibilities.
and ensure that everyone is aligned on the core vision and values of the company.
And this leads us to his insights on delegation. He stresses the importance of trusting your team, especially as your business grows.
It's impossible to do everything yourself.
He talks about creating systems that allow him to maintain overall control while giving his managers autonomy to make day-to-day decisions.
It's about finding that balance.
This is a crucial skill for any entrepreneur who wants to scale their business.
As you grow, you can't possibly micromanage every detail.
Right, you need to learn to let go.
You need to empower your team, delegate effectively, and create a culture of trust and accountability.
And Dennis offers some really practical advice on how to do that. He talks about setting clear expectations, providing the necessary resources and support,
And then stepping back.
and then stepping back to let your team do what they do best.
He also talks about the importance of establishing clear communication channels,
Regular feedback is crucial.
providing regular feedback, and fostering a culture of open dialogue where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas and their concerns.
Create an open and collaborative environment.
It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued, heard, and empowered to contribute their best work.
And then he gets into this really interesting discussion about his experience with going public, taking one of his companies public.
The IPO process,
He reflects on the pressures it created,
the scrutiny, the expectations.
the relentless focus on short-term growth, the demands of analysts,
Yeah.
and the shift away from those long-term strategies that often drive innovation and true value creation.
It can be a double-edged sword for sure.
He even suggests that going public can sometimes stifle the entrepreneurial spirit.
It's a perspective that challenges this conventional wisdom
Yeah.
that an IPO is always the ultimate goal for a successful business.
Right, it's not the be-all and end-all.
Dennis acknowledges the potential benefits, but he also highlights the potential downsides, encouraging entrepreneurs to carefully consider the implications before making that decision. It's about understanding that going public isn't just a financial transaction. It's a fundamental shift in the company's structure, its culture, and its priorities.
And then we get to his chapter on negotiations, which is full of practical tips
He's a master negotiator.
and insightful observations. He emphasizes the importance of understanding the weaknesses on both sides of any deal, the need for thorough preparation, and the role of emotion in high-stakes negotiations.
It's a psychological game as much as anything else.
He introduces this concept of the balance of weakness, arguing that serious negotiations imply a weakness in the position of at least one of the parties involved.
So it's about figuring out where the leverage lies.
He encourages readers to identify those weaknesses early on, to figure out which one is most pressing and potentially catastrophic, and then to use that knowledge to their advantage. He suggests that sometimes smaller companies can outmaneuver larger rivals in negotiations precisely because they're more agile, more willing to take risks, and better able to exploit those hidden weaknesses.
David and Goliath.
He shares this great anecdote about the flea and the elephants to illustrate this
Oh,
point.
that's a classic. Tell me that one again.
So the flea in this scenario is a young, ambitious publisher who's created a successful magazine in a growing market.
And the elephants.
The elephants are the large established corporations that are eager to acquire his company.
They want a piece of the action.
Dennis emphasizes that the flea was able to secure a favorable deal because he understood the elephants' weaknesses, their desire to enter this market quickly, and their fear of missing out on a potentially lucrative opportunity.
So he used their size against them.
He knew they were willing to pay a premium to get their foot in the door, and he used that knowledge to his advantage.
And he didn't back down.
He also played his cards carefully, demonstrating a willingness to walk away from the deal if the terms weren't favorable. He knew his worth.
He understood his value.
He understood the market dynamics, and he wasn't afraid to leverage his position to get the best possible outcome.
It's a great example of how even a small player can punch above their weight in negotiations.
If they have a clear understanding of the dynamics at play, the courage to be bold, and the willingness to walk away if the terms aren't right.
And then there's this crazy story about a Mexican standoff clause he encountered in a shareholder agreement.
I think I remember that one. It's a wild one. Tell us more about that.
So this clause was designed to resolve disputes between shareholders in a pretty dramatic way. Each shareholder involved in the dispute would submit a sealed bid for the entire company.
So whoever bids the highest wins.
The shareholder with the highest bid would then be obligated to buy out the other shareholders at that price.
So it forces a resolution.
It's essentially a high-stakes poker game where the person with the most conviction and the deepest pockets wins.
It eliminates the potential for those drawn-out legal battles.
Absolutely. It eliminates the potential for protracted legal battles and ensures that the company remains under the control of someone who's fully committed to its success. It's a bold move.
Very bold.
And it reflects Dennis's overall approach to business. He's not afraid to shake things up, to take risks, and to create systems that incentivize decisiveness and action. He also has some interesting things to say about the dangers of team spirit in the workplace, especially when it comes to financial success.
Oh, that's an interesting angle. I wouldn't have thought of that.
He encourages readers to be wary of getting swept up in the illusion of camaraderie, especially when it comes to matters of ownership, equity, and financial gain.
So it's about protecting your own interests.
He believes that in those realms, it's crucial to prioritize your own interests and make decisions that align with your long-term financial goals. He even goes so far as to suggest that those who can never be rich might try to prevent others from becoming rich. It's a cynical view, but it speaks to a certain power dynamic that can exist in workplaces, especially when there's a disparity in ambition, drive, and financial aspirations.
So you have to be aware of those dynamics and make sure you're not being held back.
He's not advocating for being cutthroat or disloyal, but he's highlighting the importance of being clear-eyed
About your own goals.
about where your interests lie and making decisions that serve your own financial well-being. It's about understanding that the business world is not always a level playing field.
And those who prioritize their own success are often the ones who ultimately achieve it.
And that's why he's such a strong advocate for ownership. He says, ownership. Ownership, ownership. Ownership is the most important thing in business, second only to cash flow.
You can't argue with that. He truly believes that true wealth and freedom come from owning your own business, controlling your destiny, and reaping the full rewards of your efforts.
He's not a fan of working for someone else's dream.
He wants people to build their own empires, to create something they can be proud of, and to control their own financial future. He even talks about the importance of acting like you own the place, even if you're just starting out as an employee.
That's a powerful mindset.
He believes that this mindset can lead to better opportunities, more respect, and a greater sense of control over your career trajectory. But he also acknowledges the challenges of ownership, the need to constantly monitor cash flow, make tough decisions,
Delegate effectively.
delegate effectively, and navigate the inevitable ups and downs of the entrepreneurial journey. He's not romanticizing entrepreneurship.
No, he's laying it all out there.
He's laying out the realities, both the exhilarating highs and the gut-wrenching lows.
And encouraging readers to approach it with their eyes wide open.
It's not for the faint of heart.
But for those with the drive, the resilience, and the unwavering belief in themselves, it can be the most rewarding path imaginable. Welcome back to our deep dive into Felix Dennis's How to Get Rich. We were talking about the challenges of ownership and Dennis's view that it's the path to true wealth. But he also acknowledges, even with that fiercely independent spirit, that delegation is crucial. You can't do everything yourself as your business starts to grow.
So true. It's like you hit a wall eventually.
Yeah.
He actually offers a really interesting framework for delegating effectively. He calls it, get this, ownership with veto.
Ownership with veto.
I know, it sounds almost contradictory. I'm curious to hear more about how that works in practice.
So essentially, it's about giving your managers, right, a real sense of ownership over their areas, their specific responsibilities, but, and this is key, you retain the right to veto any big decisions, anything that could really impact the company, its direction, or, the financial side of things.
Got it. So you empower your team, but you're also establishing clear boundaries. You're maintaining, ultimately, control over that big picture.
Exactly. Dennis argues that this balance, this autonomy, right, and oversight, it's key to scaling a business effectively.
Yeah.
Because you can step back from the day-to-day stuff, but you don't lose sight of, your vision, your overall goals.
It makes a lot of sense, especially for someone like Dennis, running multiple businesses, constantly exploring new ventures. How does he suggest actually setting those boundaries, though? How do you decide what falls under veto territory?
He's very big on setting clear financial targets at the beginning of each year. Profit margins, revenue, key performance indicators, all that spelled out in detail. The managers, they all work together to hit those targets, but they know Dennis has the final say if there's a major decision that could impact the company's, finances.
So clear expectations, providing the resources, and then trusting your team to execute. But if they want to deviate significantly, they need that buy-in.
Precisely. And he emphasizes this only works if you have a strong management team, people you really trust to make sound decisions. It's not about micromanaging, it's about finding that sweet spot.
Empowerment with oversight, it's like you're giving them freedom to run their departments, almost like their own little mini businesses.
Yes, but holding them accountable, making sure their actions align with the overall strategy.
That makes total sense. He also talks about, and we touched on this earlier, the dangers of getting too emotionally invested in a venture if it's failing. Like Blender, that CD-ROM magazine. He poured so much into it, convinced it was the next big thing, but
The market wasn't there. It's that classic, sunk cost fallacy. You're already in so deep, you just keep going, even when it's telling you to stop. And that can be hard, especially when your ego's involved.
you're so attached to the idea it's your baby. Dennis calls it reinforcing failure. Just continuing to throw resources at something that's clearly not working.
Mm.
So how do you escape that trap? When do you know it's time to walk away?
He's all about setting those clear financial targets like we talked about and timeframes. You evaluate. Is this project meeting its goals? If not, you step back, you reevaluate, and sometimes you got to make a tough decision. Maybe it's time to pivot, change course, or even shut it down.
There's real discipline in that. Being honest with yourself, even when it hurts.
Being able to say, okay, this isn't working. Sometimes the bravest thing, the smartest thing you can do is admit defeat and move on. Because holding on when it's not working, that drains your resources, it distracts you from the things that could be working, and, it can really hinder your overall success.
So sometimes letting go is the key to growth.
Mm.
Speaking of growth, Dennis is really big on the idea of constant learning. Books, conferences, surround yourself with smart people who can challenge your assumptions. Lifelong learning, basically.
Absolutely. For him, it's crucial to keep up with the business world because it's constantly changing. He argues that the world's evolving faster and faster, so the people who thrive are the ones who keep learning, adapting, evolving.
Staying curious, open to new ideas, knowing that you don't know everything.
Exactly. He even suggests finding mentors, people who can share their own experiences. And listening, that's huge. Listening to your employees, customers, even your competitors. Keep your ear to the ground, he says. You have to be in tune with, what's happening in your industry, what people need, what's trending.
So it's not just formal learning, it's about constantly being aware, observing, gathering information.
It's like developing this 360-degree vision, seeing things from different angles, and that informs your decisions.
It reminds me of that quote, "The only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing."
Right. That humility, acknowledging that you don't have all the answers, it keeps you open. And Dennis also talks about being a good judge of character, because that's crucial. Knowing who to trust, who's competent, who shares your values.
Building the right team.
He even says you should trust your gut, that first impression, that instinct. It can be valuable. But he also says intuition alone isn't enough. You got to be more structured. Check references, thorough interviews, even, personality assessments.
So you're gathering data, observing behavior, looking for patterns, signs of trustworthiness, integrity, strong work ethic. It's like being a detective, in a way.
And being willing to walk away, even if it means, losing out on a potential deal or a relationship, if it doesn't feel right.
Sometimes the best deals are the ones you don't make. Protecting yourself, your business, your reputation. But then there's this other side to him, this principle of persistence. He's all about that unwavering determination, that drive to keep going, even when things get tough.
He quotes this great line. It's from Benjamin Jowett. Never retreat, never explain, get it done, and let them howl. And that's so Dennis.
He's not afraid to make those tough calls push forward, even with opposition, with criticism. True success, for him, it means going against the grain sometimes, challenging what everyone else thinks, staying true to your own path.
And developing a thick skin. You can't let setbacks or naysayers get to you. Because every entrepreneur, every innovator, anyone who's making a change, they're going to face resistance, doubt, ridicule even,
So you gotta just keep your eye on the prize.
and learn from those mistakes. Keep moving forward with that belief in yourself and your vision. He uses the example of, Vincent van Gogh, brilliant artist, right? But misunderstood, faced so much rejection, but never stopped painting. And now his work, it's iconic.
It shows that the path to greatness, it's rarely smooth or easy. It's about staying true to yourself, not letting the opinions of others define you.
And being adaptable, too. Dennis stresses that. Being willing to change course when you have to.
Yeah.
The world is constantly evolving, he says, so what worked yesterday might not work today. You have to stay informed about what's emerging, experiment, be willing to pivot.
He uses the airline industry as an example. The guys who pioneered low-cost air travel, they ultimately failed, but their ideas, they paved the way for companies like Southwest and Ryanair.
It's like, failure isn't always the end. It can be a stepping stone. It's about adapting to circumstances, learning from your mistakes, never giving up on those goals.
Having that resilience to bounce back. And that leads us to, I think, one of the most important things Dennis talks about, the importance of self-beliefs. That unshakable faith in yourself to achieve what you set out to do.
He's adamant about that. For him, self-belief is everything. It's the foundation for all great achievements. Because that inner conviction, that confidence, it allows you to push past the doubt, the fear, to achieve things others might think are impossible.
He uses Winston Churchill as an example. Churchill's belief in himself, in his nation, it helped win World War II.
And Dennis believes we can cultivate that same level of self-belief. It's not something you're born with, it's something you build. By facing those fears, taking risks, celebrating your wins.
And confronting your own mortality, even. That's a heavy one.
He argues that by acknowledging our own, finiteness, the fact that our time is limited, we can appreciate each moment more. And we can pursue our dreams with more urgency, more passion, because we don't have forever.
It's a reminder to seize the day. But he's also incredibly honest about the potential downsides to wealth. The isolation, the constant demands, the difficulty of maintaining genuine relationships when, people might have ulterior motives.
He even calls wealth the impedimenta of virtue. It's a quote from Francis Bacon.
Wow, that's profound. It's like wealth can bring you freedom, opportunity, but it can also create obstacles to personal growth, true happiness.
Okay.
Because money, it's just a tool. It's a means to an end, not the end itself.
And he uses the story of Robert Johnson, the blues musician, to illustrate this. Incredible talent, early success, but he died, allegedly, after drinking poisoned whiskey, knowingly.
That's a tragic story.
Dennis uses it to explore that complex relationship between talent, success, and the hidden costs. Like Johnson embraced risk in his music and in his life, and it ultimately led to his downfall. It's like a warning. Even those who reach great heights, they're not immune to temptation.
True fulfillment, it's not about validation or possessions. It's about living a life that's true to your values, your passions.
And then there's this whole thing about giving it all away.
Right. Dennis actually reveals his plan to donate his entire fortune before he dies, which is, a pretty radical idea. If you're going to give it all away, why bother accumulating it in the first place?
It's a big question, but it gets to the heart of his philosophy. The true value of wealth isn't the stuff it buys you, it's the experiences, the challenges, the lessons, the impact you can have.
It's about using money as a tool for good, supporting causes you believe in, making a difference.
Letting go of those material attachments. Finding fulfillment in things money can't buy. Love, connection, purpose. Knowing you used your time and resources to leave the world a better place.
And remember that playful scenario he throws out about starting a beer company in St. Vincent.
Vincy Beer with slogans like, one for the widows and orphans and the beer for winners.
It's funny, but it's also this idea of aligning your pursuit of wealth with your interests, your values, what comes naturally to you.
Finding your own mountain to climb, as he puts it.
And speaking of mountains, he also talks about building a legacy, something that outlasts you.
Creating something that will continue to generate value, create opportunity, make a difference, even after you're gone.
Thinking about the long game, the impact you leave behind.
He believes that's how we measure true success. Not just what you accomplish in your lifetime, but the ripple effects, the positive changes you set in motion.
Inspiring stuff. It makes you think beyond your own immediate needs and consider your impact on the world around you. And I think that's a perfect lead-in to the final part of our deep dive. We're going to explore the key takeaways from Dennis's book and discuss how his insights can apply to your own journey, regardless of your financial goals or aspirations. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive, How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. We've covered a lot of ground. His journey, those insights on wealth, the challenges of entrepreneurship, really that whole mindset for success.
It's been quite a ride, hasn't it? His book, it's full of practical advice, makes you think, and he doesn't shy away from those hard truths, the stuff we often try to avoid.
He tells it like it is, no sugarcoating. But even though he's so blunt about the downsides of wealth, I think his message, it's ultimately empowering. He believes anyone can achieve financial success no matter where you start if you're willing to put in the work. Embrace those challenges. Never give up.
He's all about individual initiative, hard work, really going after what you want, and he gives you a roadmap, not some theoretical model, but based on what he went through, the good and the bad.
So let's try to distill some key takeaways. What are some of the biggest lessons you've taken from this book?
For me, it always comes back to ownership. That's central for Dennis. True wealth, true freedom, it comes from owning your business, you in control, you reap the rewards. He's not about working for someone else's dream. He wants people to build their own empires.
Oh.
Something to be proud of. Control your own financial future.
He challenges that whole idea of climbing the corporate ladder as the only way. Think bigger, consider entrepreneurship, those challenges, those rewards, building something from scratch.
And he doesn't just say, be your own boss. He gives you the steps, how to find opportunities, get funding, build that team, delegate, the strategies, the mindset, it's all there.
But he also talks about balance, right? You can't just pour everything into the business and neglect your health, your relationships. Got to find that sustainable rhythm. Prioritize those things that bring you joy, meaning outside of work. Create a life that feels full, not just successful on paper.
Especially these days, that message is so important. It's easy to get caught up in the hustle. Dennis reminds us success isn't just about money, it's about a life that feels rich on different levels.
Another big takeaway for me is persistence, that unwavering determination. Even when things get tough, you hit those setbacks, failures even.
And he's not talking about being stubborn, clinging to something that's clearly not working. It's that deep commitment to your vision, the drive to succeed, not letting setbacks define you.
He points out so many successes throughout history, they come from people who refused to give up, kept pushing when it seemed hopeless. Winston Churchill, Vincent van Gogh, incredible adversity, but they never abandoned their vision, their belief in themselves.
And he wants us to cultivate that same belief, that we can achieve our goals. He says it's not something you're born with, it's something you build by facing your fears, taking risks, celebrating those small wins.
He also talks about adaptability, being willing to learn, to change direction if you need to. The world's constantly changing, so what worked before might not work now. Stay informed, experiment, be ready to pivot.
He uses the airline industry. Those early low-cost pioneers, they failed, but their ideas led to Southwest, Ryanair. So failure can be a stepping stone. It's about adapting, learning, never giving up on what you want to achieve.
And he's a big proponent of surrounding yourself with the right people.
Yeah.
Smart people, talented people who push you, support you, help you see things differently.
Collaboration, using each other's strengths to reach those goals, building that strong team, delegating, creating a culture where everyone feels valued, respected, where they can do their best work.
Now it comes back to emotional intelligence, doesn't it? Being self-aware, managing your emotions, building those strong relationships.
Absolutely. Dennis might not use those terms, but it's there throughout the book. Being a good listener, understanding people, empathy, resolving conflict, all those things matter.
Clear communication, building trust, open dialogue. He even cautions against letting your ego get in the way. Humility, admitting when you're wrong, learning from mistakes, that's essential for long-term success.
It's not just about smarts or drive, it's that emotional side, self-awareness, building healthy relationships. And one thing I love, it's how he defines luck. Not some random force, it's preparation meeting opportunity. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, he says.
I love that. It means we can actually increase our chances of success. Be prepared, have the skills, the knowledge, be ready to seize those moments.
It's being proactive, aware, open to possibilities, taking action when those moments appear.
You're not passively waiting, you're creating the conditions for good things to happen. And that's really Dennis's whole message. You don't wait for success, you go after it. The courage to chase those dreams, the discipline to execute, the wisdom to adapt.
And that unwavering belief in yourself, that you can achieve great things. But it's not just about money, it's about living a balanced life, contributing, leaving a positive mark on the world.
Absolutely. If you're looking to explore some of these concepts further, check out lingopediamagazine.com. They have a great selection of courses and ebooks, business, finance, personal development, all sorts of topics.
Definitely worth checking out.
One last thought. Dennis talks a lot about owning things, building wealth, but in the end, he's giving it all away.
Mm.
Makes you wonder, what does ownership really mean? Is it control? Is it legacy? Or something else entirely? Something to think about as you go on your own journey.
A lot to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into how to get rich. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. Remember to subscribe, share, and like this podcast.